Hi, Raina. Yes, I put on some music today.
plan on?
I had to cancel.
Thought so.
Yeah, but I think it turned out better. Good, I cancelled it in time. I didn't wait till the last
Ah,
minute. Yeah, I don't. So now I'm thinking I'll just have some retreats in Pune only, just outside
actually,
of. Yeah, there's so many places we can go to,
yes.
and if anyone wants to travel, then they can come to Pune because here
Ah,
we know lots of places where, and
correct,
you know how the situation is, you know how to handle it.
correct.
Going to another location and then things going wrong, I don't want to risk that. So
Yeah,
found a couple of nice places around Pune that we can all go to. That should be fun.
actually. That should be fun. I mean, of course, Goa is Goa, but still.
Goa is Goa, yeah, really.
And then from Maharashtra, you don't even need RT-PCR. Now you just need 2 doses. So, which
Yeah,
is good
correct.
also.
Yeah. No, I believe Goa was expecting a lot of cases anyway, because it's almost as if the entire country just descended on Goa for New Year's. That happens every year.
Yes.
And I think this year was even more special because suddenly they felt, "Arey, now chalo, where's the
Ah,
first place you have to go and touch base, like Matha Take na?"
actually.
It's on everyone's bucket list. When are we
Yes.
going to get to go to Goa? So, yes, that's what happened.
Yeah.
Okay, so while everyone is joining in, there's two, three more people who I'm expecting to join in. If you've got any rough paper around, you could just practice a little bit of our pencil yoga from last week. And maybe, I mean, just get some newspaper or something and just keep it around. So just before class, while we're waiting, just keep your hand moving. That's something that I do almost all the time, but it's not just pencil yoga. I I've been guilty of sketching at the oddest places just because if there is time to wait, there is time to sketch. So I'm often carrying sketchbooks to places like my dentist waiting room, my parlor when I'm doing a pedicure. Where else? Airports, though, all the time. Airports and flights. I hope you don't do that, Anuja, because illustrate your flight for us from the
No,
cockpit. That
God.
would be
And I better not post that. If
yeah.
I don't tag you also. God. No.
That would be really funny.
Yeah. But we have sometimes halts in between. Sometimes there's aircraft swap, sometimes 2-3 hours halt, and they give us lounge. So that's
Ah,
a good opportunity. But unlike you, I don't know if, about others, but I'm not that confident that in public I'll start sketching. Like,
correct. No, a lot of people have that. We all have that problem. I didn't start sketching in public till I remember 2011. A very good friend of mine introduced me to an artist named Prashant Miranda, who was in NID with her.
hmm,
And he's a compulsive sketcher. So she said that he kind of just excuses himself from activity and says, wherever I am, I'm going to sketch. So even if all friends are sitting for dinner, he will sketch, and that's him having a conversation with you. So everybody just allows him to be eccentric.
hmm,
And when when she told me that, I said, yeah, I mean, I don't mind, just if people just allow me, I'll do na thoda sa sketching. So that's one thing, not appearing rude. So you can be with people and they understand your
yeah,
compulsions and they say, okay, fine, this is going to be like clicking a picture of the event. Let's
huh,
let her do
correct,
that.
correct.
The second is having people come over and walk by and look, and then they say,
Huh.
for me, it's very funny. They look at my book and they say, "Oh, are you an architect?" And I have to say, "No." I'm drawing stuff. I'm actually an artist. And this surprised me, really? Why are you then drawing out in public? I have to say, wait, let me explain.
Oh God.
Yeah, it's really funny. But yeah, you have to, so it starts small. So one thing is to carry a sketchbook around anyway, and there are places where, like, people who take notes, you just carry something small with just a pen, not like your whole paraphernalia till you're comfortable.
Mm.
And always start sketching with a pen itself directly. Don't even bother with pencil and all. It
Yes.
has to be in pen, and you will be surprised how beautiful your lines and your illustrations turn out in pen. Even if you were doing the same thing in pencil, it does not look as impressive. Pen just works.
Mm.
When you're out for a meal with the family, that's another place. It's like one step away. You can uh, it's with, one second, I'm just going to mute. Yeah, so it's like people you're comfortable with, you start sketching, and all you sketch is what's on the table. Once your meal comes, just do a quick sketch of that, click a picture and put your sketchbook away. So no more than 10 minutes of that. So you start getting used to just being out in public while other people are chatting or doing something else. You are the one who sketches. And then once you can absorb that identity for yourself as part of you, then it doesn't matter wherever you are. You have fun.
That's good. But pedicure is a good idea. That's again a good
Pedicure is, yeah.
idea.
Pedicure is good fun.
But I think I'm sorry.
Just carry an A5 size book. It's
Size,
really tiny. You just pop it in your
I've
bag.
started doing that. It's in my flight bag.
Yeah.
So on layovers also, if it's really short and like I have to rest or something, so just a small sketch, not the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a small, very tiny sketchbook.
Yeah.
Something that I should do, I thought, every day.
Yeah. And start with basic stuff like kitchen stuff. You can make a picture of your morning ritual. So if you have a tea in the morning, the chahatsa bhanda, galna, whatever you use, chahachi, barni, all of that, just draw that. If you have coffee, then draw the coffee maker. So it's like documenting your life and stuff that you interact with. You don't have to wait for that special occasion. Every day, every moment is a special occasion as far as you're concerned. So you just start putting that down. And little by little, then you start thinking, okay, if I have to draw the garland also, then maybe I'll try the texture. Maybe I'll take this spoon instead of that spoon, this cup instead of that mug. And then you start making it more aesthetic. So it's just as simple as that. You have to just get into that groove.
Yeah, that was my question actually. I mean, the thing is, I go on Pinterest, I go somewhere for a reference because it doesn't come like if you have to look at something and observe and draw or by memory. But I think copying is much easier, or that's what I have been doing for years. So it's my comfort zone. But this is a good way, probably. The result doesn't matter, but I think like the morning ritual, that's the best thing I think to start.
And then another tip I'd given all my students was to start drawing everything that you use or own. So you've got clothing, you've got bags, shoes, cosmetics, your bath ritual. There's so many things that can be part of your life. That so it just starts becoming things that I own or whatever. And every day you pick out one thing. But regarding clothing, you could probably use fabrics, make fabric prints out of that, or make a folded garment if you've got a nice, say, a jacket or something, how it looks on the hanger. You could do all sorts of things like that. So that is where you start becoming very creative.
That's nice. I'm going to do that. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll start off with making watercolor florals today. So Nikita had shared some very beautiful images last week, and I'm going to show you how to paint some of those. And the two images that I have sent, one is a lilium, which is a little more advanced than the liliums that Nikita had sent, but they're a beautiful flower to paint. And the other one is a hibiscus, because that's something that we see very often around us. And often it is, it's not illustrated very gracefully, let's be honest. They try to make it into a motif of some sorts. And most Indian flowers, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, they have become stuck in this, as an Indian or a Mughal motif, and we don't see it very often in a very contemporary context. So I thought we could do that. So that's just how you change what is familiar, at least for us, which is going to be a motif that is traditional, and learn how to see it as a contemporary motif that then you can use in things that don't immediately remind you of like a Ganesh puja or something. Just because you made a hibiscus, you can use it on a card or on a label, and it'll still look nice. You don't always have to go for European flowers. So the two techniques we're going to do today, one is going to be just indulging in washes. You can paint a lot of flowers just with few strokes here and there, which are cleverly manipulated so that you create a certain sense of depth, maybe texture, and of course we have color. So with the watercolor florals, the biggest issue and the most important issue is to be able to identify the shades of the flower accurately. So in a flower, even if it is a single colored flower, there are various shades. What we need to see past when we see a pink colored flower is not just that it is pink, but it will have at least 3 or 4 different values in that pink. There'll be one which is very light, then there will be shadows, there will be a mid-tone. That's all we need to start seeing. And that happens when we start splicing the picture, which is what we are going to do. So the first picture that we'll make is I think these are peonies which have been shared. So we see it as a pink flower, and you want to make a pink colored flower. But in this picture, you'll notice how the tips are a lot lighter. Somewhere in the middle over here, not at this junction, but a little higher, you will see that there is a mid-tone visible, and then it starts getting into darker shades. This flower also pretty much the same. You have lighter shades, medium shades, and dark shades. So we are going to create a wash in such a way that it is this medium shade, but when we apply it a certain way, when we press the brush down, we are going to get a light shade out of that medium tone itself. We are not going to make 3-4 different colors. It's about how you're going to cleverly apply the colors on it. Even for these liliums, this is a very light color, so there's very little contrast over here. And sometimes these dark shades can trip you up. What you think you should do is make a darker color, but in fact, you just apply a certain glaze. So I'm going to show you how to do that glazing today. So I'm going to demonstrate how to paint this flower. I want you to just observe how that painting is done. And I'm going to try and do it in under 10 minutes. So not to spend too much time in painting a flower when you are going to do a quick technique. Oh. 1 second. For some reason my camera is not on. All right. Okay, just give me a second. All right. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a sketch of the flower, but I'm going to make it in pen. You don't have to make it in pen. If you're more comfortable with pencil, you can make it in pencil. So when I'm drawing the flower, I'll just show you how what I'm looking at when I'm drawing this. I'm looking at the shapes made by these petals, and I'm just going to draw a few lines in the right place very briefly. That's it. I'm not going to draw each and every petal in detail. I am kind of this is going to be like a paint by numbers for myself. I'm going to just decide on where one color begins and where another color stops. So let your eye follow these lines. And the best way to get this done is to first draw one petal shape or part of it that you can see fully, which has very little or no overlap as far as possible. Based on this first shape and size, you will make the rest. So you literally calculate and say, okay, just at the end of the tip, I'm going to start the next petal, and this is the shape it's going to be. After that little bump, I'm going to make a vertical line that almost goes 90 degrees and then turns to the left. So you can do this dialogue in your brain. This happens very naturally afterwards, but before you become proficient, you need to know what you're looking at. So at every point, you are just identifying a spot where a certain shape like this and this shape nestles into each other. And then you have like a figure 3 over here on top. Then you have another, which is like as if this were the center, then this line goes to about maybe 5 o'clock direction if we were to identify this on a clock face. Once you have these shapes going, the rest of them start becoming fairly easy. You just start marking them like so. Now, this is very easy for me to draw over here, but when you're drawing on your paper, it's going to be slightly different because there's nothing to trace from. You have to look at your picture, draw it over here on a blank paper. So identify the space that you want to consume over here. I'm going to make the flower no bigger than about this. It's about 3 inches. And in that, this is somewhere where the center is. So I'm just moving my pen around in blank space above that area to demarcate more or less where the center of the flower is. And right below the center is where my first petal will start. The one I showed you, I'm going to start with. Now I'm not drawing the line completely. I'm leaving some gaps in the line, but they're not a dash kind of line. So the line is like a flowing line. It flows like this, one into the other. And as you see, it's like you find clues in the picture. And as you find the clues, you start making more and more lines. Now here there's an overlap, so I'll draw the overlap immediately. And at every point before I start the line, I will think, is this where I need to start? So after this is done, I'm going to draw the fold of the overlapping petal. Somewhere at this fold is where I have another petal which is going to overlap the bottom petal like this. So now if you do this kind of a dialogue, then you at least have some way of remembering which petal you're drawing. Because if you don't, with so many petals and with this kind of chaos in which they have been arranged, you can easily get lost in this. They're like the billowing skirts. Now, in between, if you don't have the right information, don't draw anything. Don't try to complete any line that is not fully visible to you. And if you miss out on a few petals, because by the time you go around and come back, or you go this way, you will have either added petals or eaten up some petals in this whole composition. Don't stop making the illustration and don't try to fit in things that you have missed out. Just move on, move on. The flower does not mind. In trying to fix anything, you might actually make it worse. So we needn't bother with that. We are just looking at getting more or less the shape of the petals and the flower. So this is how I have completed my illustration. I'll make these lovely sepals also over here because they give a lovely contrast to the picture and make a stem the way I see it in the image. Now I'm going to attempt at painting this with and without the line work. So I'll make a second one, maybe somewhere over here as I finish this. I think this has taken me, what, about 3 minutes or so? Now I'm not going to give you 10 minutes. I'm going to give you more time. Don't worry about that. But I want to show you how the quick painting thing works also. Once your illustration is done, most of the work is done. I think I've missed out a couple of petals here. Yeah. Now, because this is waterproof ink, when I paint on this, nothing's going to happen to my painting. Where is the center? I've lost the center somewhere over here. Here it is. No, not here. Above this, above this. This is the center. Okay, so I've missed out a couple of more petals. So right inside this is where I'm going to paint a little yellow because there are some pollen over there that I see. And I'm creating a color which is a very watery crimson shade. The palette. Okay, so I have a color mixture over here. I'm just going to use that. It's a mix of crimson and some other colors. So my flower might look a little dark, but it's such a light shade that I might get away with it. Now, this is the consistency of paint that I'm making. It's a very runny paint. And I'm going to make a swatch of that over here so you can see how light it is going to appear. This is going to dry up and become even lighter. Now what I'm going to do is, as I apply this, there's a lot of paint in my brush and I'm using a medium-sized brush. I will keep a rag handy so I can remove excess paint and just rub my brush on top of my petal, bringing it down in a downward stroke so that the color comes towards the bottom. Now, a few places you'll see these white spots, and I'm just leaving them accidentally, but they will still work. I don't have to paint one petal at a time because mostly it's the same color throughout. So this is going to be just one wash, but as you can see, wherever I press the brush, the color just gets embedded into the paper. And when I lift the brush or I let go a little bit, you see a little dark spot emerge. That's exactly what I want. If you leave some places like over here, because the yellow is too close and I don't want the yellow and the pink to merge, you just leave them there. Now, once your first layer is done, you use the same color, but this is what I do. I let the color flow a little bit and use this color over here in the drier section, because now I need a slightly deeper shade, but the consistency has to still be watery. And here, while the paint is still wet, I will touch my brush to the edge that I want darker and make a stroke like that. So instantly that section becomes deeper. See, instantly. So just with a simple stroke over here, I'm going to touch it towards the bottom. This is still wet. You're able to create an impression of a flower. So very often this would be the technique that is used in the beginning of painting any flower. Even if you want to make a very realistic flower, you would still use this technique, because in watercolor, it's all about laying down a wash and then building up with a better and better, deeper and deeper wash. So this is 2 layers of washes on my illustration. After this thing dries, then I will get into it with a deeper color. So in the time that I'm waiting for it to dry, do you want to try drawing this and start with the 2 washes? So give yourself time. You can take some time to make this drawing. Don't do this in 10 minutes. So even 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes to just make the drawing is perfectly okay. What I will encourage you, however, to do is try to not use an eraser. Just throw the eraser somewhere right now so that you can't find it, like on top of the fan or the cupboard or something like that, where it's going to be difficult for you to go and get it. If you just put it away, then there's a chance that you will leap for it. So the colors, this color that I have used, I'm going to write the mixture, but you don't need to make it this elaborate. You can just use crimson, orange, and gamboge. That's what you can use. I have used crimson. This is for another project that I was working on. I was painting Rajma. So this is the final color that I used for Rajma, which I've lightened for the flower. Crimson plus orange plus burnt umber.
I finished drawing and I also did the first wash.
Okay.
But I accidentally doubled the size of the flower and it's really huge and it's like half page now.
Okay. So?
So do I have to shade and say, because I think bigger pictures need more detail?
Not necessarily. Bigger pictures need a bigger brush. So can I have a look at your painting? And then I'll just give you a strategy of how you be going about it. Okay. So use a 6 or no, use an 8 or 10 number brush when you're painting the washes. If you use a thinner brush, the paint will dry before you can make any of these strokes. And you can make the same strokes using a fatter brush also. The shape would be larger. Like if you have a tiny brush and you make a shape like that, it will be really tiny. And if you use a fat brush, you can make the same shape. It's almost as if it's magnified.
I'm using a 9 right now.
You're using a 9? Okay. Okay. Yeah, Karan. Looks good. Very nice. There are some petals on the right-hand side, like the ones that I had missed. I think you also missed on the top. Do you want to check that? Some on the right and the top over here. Because there's a whole bunch that comes beyond this.
No, actually.
No? Okay. Because the center of your flower looks like it is slightly lower than it should be. Okay, everyone, is everyone painting? Shall we take 5 minutes for painting? Then I'll proceed. Okay. So when you're doing any watercolor, a tip is to keep a rough paper handy. You need the rough paper for 3 things. One is, of course, to check if you've got the right shade that you want. Second is to check if your paint is the right consistency you want. And third is either to check if you're using the right brush or how much paint is being held by the brush so that you don't have excess paint falling onto your artwork, or the brush is too dry, you don't have enough medium. So all these 3 can be checked on that rough sheet of paper. Now, rough sheets of paper should be the same paper that you're using for your artwork. You can't use printer paper as a rough sheet just because it's available. They need to have the same color, same texture as the paper that you're using. Even if it is some old, it can't even be a different GSM paper. So if you have a 300 GSM paper, for example, which is just lying around, or if you are painting this on a 300 GSM paper, then you can't use a 130 GSM for the testing. A higher GSM paper has more fiber, and because of that, it tends to be very, how do you say, hydrophiliac. It loves water. It wants more and more water. So you can You can make several layers, and also those layers of paint are for some time very loosely distributed on the top of the surface of the paper. So then they can be dislodged often. On a thinner paper, the fiber is less dense, so paint tends to dry faster. And because of that, you need to be very careful about which kind of brush you're using. A fat brush in the right place can give you a great glaze without stripes or spots. But a very fat brush in a small area, if I use something like a 12 number brush on a small area like that, all I'll do is create a puddle over here. You don't want puddles in your paintings, not always in any case. Now, the other question also is, when you are using watercolor paper, what should you go for? A hot press or a cold press paper? That's also a common question. So hot press paper is one which is very smooth. Even if it is a 300 GSM high fiber paper, it's very smooth. So you can do a lot of detailing on it. If you've got stripes or lines or some kind of dot texture that is going to make the flower look more realistic, then it's a good idea to use a hot press watercolor paper. But cold press paper has its own charm. It's got a bit of texture. It's got what's called a bit of tooth. So that paper has, say when you rub a brush across it, sometimes some parts of the paper don't even come into contact with the brush. So you get this very beautiful dry brush effect, even if it's a wet brush that you have applied onto your paper. And sometimes that texture adds to the, what should I say, watercolorness of your painting. It looks more like a watercolor. The way to remember this, which is hot press and which is cold press, a hot press paper looks like somebody has just ironed on it. So it's really flat and smooth. And a cold press paper looks like our own flesh when we feel really cold. We get this goose flesh. That paper looks like goose flesh. So that's how you can remember which is hot and which is cold. Okay, how are the two first layers going?
I've done the first one, just waiting. Thoda sa, it'll dry a bit, then I'll do the second one.
All right, okay.
I'm also done with the first one.
Okay.
I'm done with both the layers.
All right, okay. So while we wait for this to dry, let's move on to the other flowers so that we can conserve some time. Again, this you can just watch me paint. I'm going to try and paint the same flower, but just with washes. So here again, now that we have studied the structure and we've also drawn it, here it's going to look a lot more graphic than this. It's just going to be splotches of color. But the technique is pretty much the same. Like we had applied paint over here. You just apply paint in various directions, like the petals, like we see the petals. So the petals which are surrounding the center, you will just move your brush according to the orientation of the petals so that the paint comes downward. Here you will move them sideways. And you can wait in between these so that they dry and the color doesn't blend too much.
Ma'am, what would be the consistency of the paint? It will be like really runny, right?
Yeah, just like this. It's very runny. And here we are going to not just look forward to these kind of color blends where one color mixes onto the other. And then you can also create denser sections like this in the center. Drop in paint cleverly in some places where the petals have shadows. And they're very, very casually drawn. They're not all random. They are carefully positioned. So as you can see, I'm not blindly painting this. I'm considering the consequences of my brush action and applying the brush very slowly and deliberately. Sometimes I press a little more, sometimes I press a little less. And this time now, I'm going to drop in that yellow paint with a thin brush. This is going to be gamboge in the center, but I'm not going to paint the whole thing. I'm just going to drop it in like few dots here and there. Some places it will blend into the color and the rest it's just going to stick out like that. Now, as this painting dries up, as it is beginning to dry, I can add more and more details to this, partly when it's drying and partly when it has completely dried. So you can keep, if you add color when the painting is wet, you get a fuzzy line. And when you add color when it's dry, you get a much firmer line. Now, funnily enough, you will be able to do this second flower much better after you have made a drawing of the first flower. So while this looks like, array, isme kya hai? It's just some washes, it's not as simple as that. And I've tried to explain this to a lot of people, and I'm sure this is very true in a lot of other subjects as well. For some people, this, not for some people, in some projects, you will notice that with the briefest of strokes, the artist is able to convey a lot more and with a lot more accuracy than sometimes some of the most detailed pictures that you might encounter. And that's something that it's really a skill that comes from years of practicing seeing objects a certain way, knowing where exactly you should apply a color for what effect. Okay, now while this is drying and while your first layers are drying, I'm going to start putting my third layer here, which is just going to be the same actions in the same color tone. Maybe if need be, you can make it darker, but in this flower, I won't need them to be darker. And because the sections are well demarcated, you know where you can add an extra color. So just a stroke here, maybe a stroke here for that depth inside the petal. There seems to be something here. Now, I would just like to draw your attention to how I'm applying a color to a dry section. If you could just observe this. I have very little paint in my brush and I'm going to start somewhere. I'm going to make this section really dark, but I'm not going to start at the top. I'm going to start at the bottom and start pulling strokes downward to add that depth. Then I've wiped my brush and I'm going to use the residual paint to do the same action again. That way, I get two distinct shades by just using one shade of color. I'm going to do this one more time. So if you'd like, if you missed it the first time, just see it again. Here I'm going to create a shade, a graduated shadow. I'm filling the paint up in the darker sections first. Wiping the brush. I'm not washing it. I'm wiping it on my rag. And then I'm going to make more strokes, but this time pressing the brush down. So there's a long scientific explanation which I can give you for how this works. Would you like to hear that, or just follow this and just do it? Okay, I'm going to give you the scientific explanation. So what happens when we work with watercolors? The first layer of watercolor, it almost wakes the paper up. You can think of it like that. Now the paper is ready for action, the first wash. After that, every bit of pigment that you put onto it goes and kind of has a conversation with the pigments that were already deposited on the layer. So the earlier pigments activate a little bit, the new pigment goes and settles somewhere in between them. It's like getting more people to a party and then you find chairs and tables and whatever for them to sit, and then everybody's settled. And then you do the same thing with the third layer and the fourth layer. Now, when we are applying paint, the pressure with which you apply the paint also becomes rather a significant factor. If you delicately apply the paint with the tip of the brush, depending upon the consistency, you will have like a dark patch that gets deposited. Most people only paint with a brush like as if we were writing with a pen. But that's missing out on the opportunity that a brush can afford. A brush can be pressed down as well. So here, if I want to make a dark shade, I can press it, which a pen cannot. And when you press it, you can get shapes, different kinds of shapes. Then when you wipe and wash the brush, you can reactivate those pigments, but just lighter and lighter. Again, with a hydrated brush, I'm coming third time round. And just using this wet paint to make a glaze on the rest of the petal. I don't know what I've done over here. So I'm just going to make some kind of shadow here. The way I see it logically present itself. Here again, I'm going to do the same. I've applied the play paint along the edge, wash and wipe the brush, or just wipe the brush and that's fine as well. If you wash the brush, there's a chance that you might pick up some extra water and that might just spoil the mood over here. So I'll tell you the things that you will probably need practice for is how much to press, where exactly to press, and getting the desired result or working with what you get, the result that you do get. You might have unpredictable results right now. So just observe what is happening. For any picture to look really beautiful, even if it's just with washes, you need adequate contrast. Otherwise, it's just going to look like a bunch of washes, which it is, but no, we are supposed to create an illusion the illusion of a flower here. So layer upon layer, we are adding more depth to our picture. Your final dark color must also look like it's built up of these shades. So I wouldn't recommend making a dark shade. It's just a deeper shade of the color that you can use for the dark parts of the picture. Now also remember that some of your application can be a little imprecise also. Not everything needs to be color by numbers. So in some places, if your brush stroke goes a little off, some of the color comes outside the petal, it can actually create the impression of movement in the flower. Okay, so everyone is on to their second and third layers?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, is any of you trying this flower, the only watercolor bit? Anybody? Because if you're not, then I can just complete this while you all are painting.
Okay, I'm not doing it now. Maybe in the recording.
Yeah, okay, no problem. So now in this flower, all I'm going to do is this negative painting in a few places. So just painting around what I see as those petals around the center and create that dark center, which also can be avoided. So beyond this point, now everything starts becoming very specific. But you can make it casual also if you know how to wield the brush. Now a flower like that looks really nice on a card, a quick thank you card or something. When the message is more important than how pretty the card looks. And it's a lovely embellishment, just the way it is onto the card. Unfortunately, we don't live in an age where people send too many cards anymore. So I'm sure Victorian ladies would have really appreciated that tip. Or we can start sending cards.
What color should I use for the stem?
For what?
For the stem.
Oh, you've come to the stem? Okay. What color do you think you should use? Do you have any
Sap green plus some yellow.
yes. Any idea which yellow you can use?
Like I have gamboge. I can use gamboge.
Okay, so why don't you make a couple of those shades, test them out and see which one is the best to use.
I tried the stem and I used firstly of gamboge and then I added sap green plus brown and then another brown.
Okay, that should work as well. So the thing with color is that all of us see color a certain way. This is like an existential question. My daughter, when she was about 3 or 4, had asked me this question. It just blew my mind. She says, how do you know that the color that I call red and I see red, you also see the exact same way? And because she was 2 or 3, I thought, well, I don't know what she's saying. So I said, Agni, that's why it's called red. She said, no, I know it's called red, but that's because you call it red and I know what you're pointing at. So I can say, yes, that is red. But how do you know that this exactly that color itself? So what if it is actually a green and forever, whatever you have shown me as green, I call it as it's red. It's just a label, no? So it took me a while to even get what she's trying to tell me. Okay, now the intention that I have for making this, when I'm making this flower, is to create pretty looking shapes in this. You can tell that there doesn't seem to be too much of petal action happening here. So whatever shapes I'm making, I'm trying to make them look interesting. And there are a lot of overlaps, a lot of shapes have gone all over the place. And I'm adding more and more drama with these brush strokes that look interesting. And adequate contrast in the right places so that it looks dramatic. And when something like that is made, and you're going to say, write lettering around it, do some lettering around it, the flower just becomes like a supporting cast. So here's also a clue on how you should know where you need to give how much importance. So when you're looking at the green, you see that the green is not a vibrant green. It's got some amount of yellow in it, some amount of brown in it. So as you see, that way you can just organically mix the colors and just apply them. So here there's 2 shades that I've applied. One is a yellow ochre and sap green. And this second shade is these 2 along with burnt umber, which while it is wet, I've just run a brush along one side so that it disperses well into the stem. And I get a very nice highlight. So mind you, I've used a very small, thin brush for this. And I've also made very little of that color. The right shade of any color is like climbing the peak of a mountain. there are often multiple routes that you can take to reach the peak of a mountain, and all take you to that peak, right? So you can have multiple color options for the same shade. You can come this way and get the same shade. You can come this way and get the same shade. So if you're going to use sap green, yellow ochre and get that shade, great. If you're going to use sap green and brown and then a gamboge, that's also fine. So in a particular shade, the differences are in tonality, meaning does this look like a yellowish tone, a reddish tone, a bluish tone, a brownish tone? So there's like an undertone. The second is intensity of color. So how bright or dull it is. Like this is a dull pink, but it can be a brighter pink. This would be a brighter pink. And what is the so intensity would be with how much pigment you have. So there's something like 8 or 10 different qualities of color. This is for the nerd amongst you who would like to know this. You have what's called the hue of the color, which is whether it's red, yellow, brown, whatever. Then you've got saturation, how brilliant it is. Then you've got tone, what undertone it has. And what else does it have? Hue, tone, saturation. It'll come to me. So a lot of Japanese and Chinese paintings are of this nature, very brief strokes. And I'm sure they will have some Mahan philosophy behind why to make paintings with such brief strokes also. But they're very beautiful to observe how they can create the same impact with such few lines. So they are literally one of the first impressionists, one would say, because they are satisfied with just making an impression of a particular flower or an animal, maybe. Now, if we are going to make this as a note for somebody, then you can make some additions like add a flower, a leaf to this. Otherwise, it looks rather boring. Here, it won't look that bad, but here it could. And again, what I'm doing is just pressing the brush and creating this drama. This is good enough. So with this, now you can just write, how would this be? This would be a card like that, maybe. You can just do very simple lettering. And add to the composition. So when you just see this with the thank you, this is good enough. You don't need anything more. How's everyone doing? Have you finished your flower?
I finished one.
Okay. One second. Let me just pin this and have a closer look. Okay. Okay, looks nice. Looks nice. Good. Your color blending is very good. Nice. Now just one last bit, because this was made in very brief strokes. Just take a little bit of burnt umber, a very little bit of burnt umber, and make a few dots towards the bottom part of this, and then spread them out like that. First with denser paint and then with slightly lighter paint. You can also take, I think, gamboge or yellow ochre will also do if you want. This will add that little texture of pollen right in the center. I think gamboge would still be better, or yellow ochre, than burnt umber. But of course, my burnt umber will dry up, so it will become a lot lighter. Now, whenever you're making pollen in the center of a flower, ideally don't distribute those dots around like polka dots. They can be closer to each other in the darker shadowy area, and then further away in the lighter area. Not because that's how they're distributed, but in the shadows, we don't see their dimensions. So you just see all of them clumped together as one shadow. But in the lighter sections, a lot more more parts of the pollen are exposed to sunlight, so then the shadows become either sharper or reduced. Okay, now do you want to try the hibiscus in this technique? Or you can do it in this technique also if you want. There isn't too much detail in that, so you might be able to just make it with one color, see? So you can paint like that. You can see that the petals have got these rounded edges. Those could be how your brush is placed. Press and pull down towards the center in these, in the form of these curves. From here, it is bending the other way. In some places, you might also have to make straight lines. You might have to make a straight line here and then tilt out. Okay, so do you want to try this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And again, now Rayana, this time make the flowers smaller. Make it just about so much.
That was an accident. Instead of making the whole flower 3 inches, I made the first petal 3 inches and then the flower just kept getting bigger.
Wow, of course.
Aditi,
Yeah.
could you please help me with the colors? This is my first lesson with colors, as in watercolors. So
Okay.
now you begin straight with using the pigment. So what combinations do I use apart from crimson in this for the hibiscus?
For the hibiscus, you can use scarlet and crimson. Make a puddle of paint with that combination. More scarlet, less crimson. So you get a certain vibrancy.
This is what I did. for the original flower.
The 18 color set that you recommended has
Yeah.
vermilion, orange, and crimson. There's no scarlet in this.
All right. So vermilion and crimson will be fine. Vermilion and scarlet are very close to each other.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So here goes. So I'm starting with my first stroke like that. And all the other strokes I'm going to make next to it like this. To just take care that those strokes are not right next to each other. So one is slightly lower, slightly higher. And now this is going to happen as you paint, the pigment starts reducing. So allow for that in some areas so that you get lighter parts of the petal automatically. You don't have to create lighter parts. So once again, I'm going to start off with a loaded brush. And you'll notice that the edge is not the same shape throughout. To keep changing the brush, some places use the tip. But at any rate, always try to press it down. And when I say press, let me just show you. Don't flatten the brush completely. Press it so that instead of maybe about 3 mm pressing down, which is normally what would happen if you start painting, you press 6 down, not the whole paint brush down. Make sure that your paint is always well hydrated. And at this stage, don't worry about the shade changing suddenly, because you might have mixed a certain amount of paint and then suddenly you run out and then you wonder, now what will I do, because the colors are going to be different. They can't be very different. They will be only this different. So don't worry about that. So some places I'm also manipulating the frill part. See, I'll make a shape like that. And then I'll pull it down. It's not always the tip of the brush shape itself, but that's a good guideline. As you come close to this anther in the center, you can either use a pencil and draw it, because imagining it would be asking too much right now. So just draw that damn thing. And deliberately stick it outwards so that you don't have to worry about these little pollen and leaving space for those pollen at the end. But do make this 4-pronged end for the 5-pronged end for the main anther part. Now, one tricky bit over here is from the right side when you're making this petal, and we have to pull the brush towards the left. If you're not able to do that, because it's not polite to ask a right-handed person to do that, you can pull it the other way around. So pull it from here to there, but try to press your brush that is paramount. And then when you come towards the end, just manipulate the frill part of it. So by manipulation, I mean just move your brush along that edge as you see it. So kind of like creating an outline, but with the brush. Just spread that paint along there. Even this next one where we have to draw the petal coming downward. It's okay if you don't draw it going into the flower, it can come down. And then as it comes down, lift the brush up. So automatically you get this brush tip here. But remember to change the direction a little bit. Don't have all of them pointing in the same direction and ending at the same point. And some of them can be a little fat, some can be a little thin. So this is our layer 1. Sometimes when you're painting these flowers and you, like I did right now, you make some strokes later and they overlap a previous petal and suddenly that part of the petal looks transparent or blotchy or whatever. Don't worry too much about it. We are not really attempting to make a realistic flower over here. We're making an impression of a hibiscus. It is whatever we try to do, if we have the right structure and we draw the lines or paint the lines in a particular orientation, it will look like a hibiscus. How is it going, Dipti?
Good. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay. All right. Now, once this is done, we can add more depth to our shade, right? So let me put this color up as well. To this same color, we can add a little more crimson and a little bit of, I think burnt umber should do it. Now burnt umber in the as a cake looks so dark and dense, but it's just a brown in the end. And what we'll do with this is make some strokes which demarcate the petal. So you can make a stroke like that. From
Which one is the burnt umber?
The burnt umber is this one here.
Oh, okay.
Do you have that color chart that comes with this kit?
No, I don't have it.
Okay, I'll send it to you, and you can make a color chart with tear out a small piece of paper from behind your book, and the color chart I send you, that in that you'll have the names of all the colors. So what you should do is make a small circle of that shade on this paper, so you know how the color looks.
Yeah, right.
And then write the name around it. I'll send you the prepared color chart, not the one that comes with this.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, now I'm going to place the tip of the brush along the edge and press and pull it like that. So I am adding depth and an edge to the petal. So press down and then pull up. There's also this dark section here, which can be just another glaze of scarlet, I think, or vermilion, whichever color you landed up using. So you create this very nice depression in the center of the flower. Now to create the end of the anther, use a brush which you have wiped, so you have very little paint, and then draw it outward. And then just at the tip, you can add a nice red dot. So you get a very nice graduated shade. My flower has turned out much darker in color than I had intended, because this puddle that I have has got some other colors in it also. To just that pigment is just crept in. Now using a thin brush and a little bit of gamboge or chrome yellow or something like that, you can make these dots around the anther. And again, when you're making these dots, just observe the flower. Don't just make them at random, equal length or whatever that you might imagine them to be. They're mixed up, they're of different sizes, and they're distributed, like sprinkled around that tip. Now from here, if we want to make it a little more advanced, we can use this deep shade that we made, the same shade, and a very fine brush, and try to draw these ridges or veins inside the petal. So the vein structure is quite beautiful and quite simple also. Start off with making one vein going towards the top center. Then you have one that always create the line in such a way that it pulls attention towards the center of the flower. That's the whole purpose behind these colorings. And then after you've made these 3 veins, you can then split them up and create more veins like that. Now, it's very important, if you want this to look nice, to get your line really thin. And if you're not fully confident about doing this in paint, you can always create this in color pencil. You can just use a darker shade of a pencil and create this. When you're making these lines also, the structure of the line is such that the peripheral veins should originate from the main veins that you've made. If you make random lines, like just make a line like that and then they're not touching each other, they tend to look really shabby. So here now I'm adding a third color, which is more burnt umber towards the center only, so that it looks a little more dramatic. And I can use the same color for the veins also if I want. Oh no, that might become too dark. when you are making these lines, remember to pull the line behind the brush. So if the line is going up, you point the tip at the origin and then draw the line outward. So the brush moves like in such a manner. If we draw the line coming into over here, it's fine. As long as the line comes in a straight line behind the brush, as if a cat's tail has been dipped in paint and it's just tracing its color all over the floor. What I mean to say is don't draw lines which are perpendicular to the angle of the brush. The line has to be parallel to the angle of the brush. Parallel, and this would be perpendicular. So parallel lines come very easily when you're making the lines coming downward, because that's the natural way in which you will draw the line. But when you have to draw horizontal lines, our natural instinct is to draw a line like this. Whereas you need to turn your hand around. So if this is your natural hold, you turn it sideways and you pull a line outward like this. The side veins should also be very slim. As far as possible, don't make the angle very wide. It looks very unnatural on this flower. And if you have a wide petal, you can make more than 3 main veins also. There isn't a rule that it just has to always be 3. Rotate your book to bring it to the most comfortable orientation so that you can make these lines. And now here in the center, I'm going to again take a slightly damp brush and just pull the color inward like that, because it can't look so white. So the neighboring color just comes in and fills in that space. And that's all, that's as much as I need. So you'll notice that I have some really funny patches of color because I think my paint was a little too wet over here. So it has dried up as a patch. But because I have given the shadows in the right places, patchy does not really matter. It's fine, it works. It doesn't make that much of a difference. So I want you to not be too distraught with patchy application as far as possible. Oh, nice. Very nice, Karan. Good.
And this is what I tried for the second peony.
This is also very nice. Yeah, the brush strokes are also well done. Move a little to the right. Now I can see. No, where your head is, keep your book. Right. Okay, this is nice. This is a good attempt.
So show Aditi.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. The hibiscus has turned out much nicer than the peony.
Yeah.
The peony is a very tricky flower in any case. Yeah, but good. Centrala, have you used gamboge or lemon yellow?
Gamboge.
Okay,
It looks like lemon yellow, na? Very light.
I think you can make it a little deeper towards the bottom. That whatever part you've painted gamboge, towards the bottom, just make it a little deeper. So then it doesn't look so strikingly lemon yellow. Okay. Oh, very nice, Diana. Looking lovely.
Ma'am,
Good.
in real life, it sort of looks like a fluffy bird's tail.
A bird's tail.
Yeah, if you look at each petal individually, it's going to look like a bird's tail.
Ah, okay. That's true. It does look like that. Now what to do? So now all these that we have done are the quick method of painting. This is not the detailed method because we haven't got to that. But the hibiscus was one step further in detailing because we made the veins. Similarly, there are more and more things that one does in which you will add a base color and then you add another shade of color, so on and so forth, to keep adding more and more interest in the flower. So I'm going to share the class that I did on Tuesday where we made an orchid. Anuja is already doing that. But all of you can at least see that video. Towards the end, we've made an orchid. And that has more detail in it. So let me just show you this. So maybe you can just go through it and see how many more steps there are in creating this. It's more or less exactly the same. If you notice, we have a wash and then we have darker shades of color thrown in like we did over here. And then we have lines made. So the central section was a different kind of detailing, which then you can observe. And if you want to make it, please go ahead and make it. All right. Okay, so I'll share this video and I'll also share the reference images so you know what we used to refer to. Right.
Then I just wanted to show. This is a different drawing that I've done.
Okay.
And in this, I did not really use the method that we have done right now.
Okay.
Like not completely.
Okay.
So
let me just pin this and have a look.
What I did,
Huh.
First I did the black part, left the white space, and then made the orange. So this is not like what you would have done.
The black part is always last because it can interfere with the rest of the colors. It's looking very nice, but it's yeah, it's looking beautiful. Very nice. Very nicely done. So the black part you can put later and keep making it deeper and deeper by putting more and more layers on it. You know, very nicely done.
But for the bottom, like this part, I first laid down the paint. Then after that, I made the different shapes.
Yes. Now in this also, Karan, you can make it in layers. So the different shapes can be made in at least 3 different layers, building more and more and more. And every successive layer that you build, you paint a smaller and smaller section so that you add more and more depth to the whole picture. Okay, good. So now just for practice, what I will advise all of you to do is try and look for pictures of flowers and paint them on small cards. So just in the center of a card, no bigger than about 3 inches by 4 inches. So you don't have, it's not too daunting for you. Look for flowers which are like the cherry blossom or like this peony, which you can just make quickly with just a few shades, throw in a few pollen here or there. And why I'm saying this to you is because otherwise this exercise will just remain in the book. So we want to find a way that you can apply this more frequently and actually use it. So make these cards ready so that next time you have to go to a party or something, you can just take this card along. And in that, you will start getting ideas. So firstly, you'll get a lot of practice in painting. So those of you who are still new at painting, you start understanding how the medium works for you. And then you might have more questions for me, which I can help you solve. And worst case, you'll have something painted, which is good enough. And if you're not very happy with how it looks, just do this brush splatter technique, and suddenly it'll look very expressionist and very beautiful. So that's my constant go-to. And if you want it to look even more spectacular, keep a bottle of gold paint handy. So you can just splatter gold as the last layer on anything, and it just looks smashing. Okay, so any questions from anyone? All right. So please share your pictures on the group. I'll share mine as well. I'm going to do a little more lettering on this, and I'll share it in about half an hour or so. Okay, so I shall see you all next week. Bye, everyone. Happy Sankrant.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye. Happy Sankranti.
Thank you. Happy Sankranti.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.